right, well, hello, everyone, and we certainly want to welcome you all to the historic Hallison Hill Lodge and certainly to Olympian Hall. I can think of no more fitting place to have our conversation today than acknowledging two champions for all of us who live here in Steamboat Springs and in Routt County. And I certainly want to take the opportunity also to just quickly introduce Representative Lukens as well as Commissioner Salinas. We also have Routt County Commissioner Sonia Macy's, who I'll hand it off to in a moment to do the official introductions. But I just wanted to again say welcome. My name is Gail Gary. I'm honored to serve as the president of the Steamboat Springs City Council. Thank you. And one of the really awesome things is being able to work with our federal partners, our county partners, our state partners. We really have great partnerships that serve this community well. And again, just really excited to introduce and to welcome both of you here today. And again, before I hand off the mic, I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you. We really appreciate all that you have done for the city of Steamboat Springs, as well as all of the communities here in Northwest Colorado. You have been strong advocates for issues that are important to our communities, and we absolutely appreciate that. Issues like workforce housing, issues like the post office, right, which, sorry. We've made a lot of progress on that, but I think we have a little more work to do. So we'll be talking about that as well. But again, we just really appreciate all of their tireless efforts, particularly as I say, as it relates to workforce housing. They worked on the Flexible Partnership Act, which allows communities like ours to work with the Forest Service to use lands that are designated for administrative use but that aren't used. And so we've got a parcel like that on Hilltop that we're looking at putting in workforce housing. So again, it's thanks to their leadership on that front. And I did mention the post office. As I said, we've worked really hard with, on trying to solve some of the delivery issues with the post office. Again, we've got a lot of work to do, as well as how they manage that aspect of that. But we also want to say thank you from all of us in Old Town, who we actually now have free P.O. boxes, which we didn't have that option before. So again, it's all because of the work that you all have done, and we certainly appreciate that and look forward to challenging all the challenging issues before us and working on those in the years to come. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Routt County Commissioner Sonia Macy's for the official introduction.
Thank you, Gail. How about a round of applause for Gail Gary? How easy is her job these days? Yeah, she's going to have a fun one tonight. Well, I am just so honored to be here, and I think Gail said the right word, which is champions, but I'm going to say champions for our public lands. Does anybody remember what happened recently? Anybody heard about what happened in the big, beautiful bill? But it didn't happen because we have representatives and congressmen who helped us get that public land sale out of the bill. So how about a round of applause for the two of them for that? Thank you, thank you. I think that is just one example of how we are represented and servant leadership and the type of leadership we see with these two individuals. I think to do these jobs, which are not easy, first of all, you have to be a quality individual. And I can tell you that both Congressman Neguse and Senator Bennet are quality individuals. I don't know how they do it every single day through two of the administrations that we're living with, which is outrageous, but they do it. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about how I met Congressman Neguse. If you haven't had an opportunity to work on a congressional campaign, you should. It's a lot of fun, and you get to meet a lot of people and go cool places. And so when Joe was first running, we actually, I was working with Diane Mitch Bush. How about a round of applause for her? Yay. Diane tried to take over CD3, and obviously we know we didn't do that, but we did get out of it, so that's a really good thing. So for the first time in a long time, we have a congressman, and that's really refreshing to see. But anyway, one of the things that we see with our congressional delegation, at least on the Democratic side, is that we support each other. And so Joe and I were at a meeting at Diana DeGette's house with a lot of people who were running for Congress. Diane Mitch Bush, you, Jason Crow was there. And we were sitting in the meeting. He says, oh, I have to tell you, if you see me get up and leave the room, it's because my wife's having a baby like right now, like right this very minute. And he has been, he's had 2 babies since that time, has been serving us in Congress since 2018, and has not lost his sense of humor, his energy, and his capacity to work with us really productively. So we are so appreciative to have a congressman. He entertains us with calls. Commissioners and council members get some time to talk about what's important to us. So we're really grateful to have good representation. Thank you. How about a round of applause for him? And I am actually shocked to report that Senator Bennet has been with us in the Senate since 2009. Is that right? That's hard to believe. It's amazing. Thank you. And I just...
That's 100 years in Ted Cruz years.
That's right. 100 years in Ted Cruz years, that is for sure. Well, you know, I mentioned being champions for public lands, and I think it's really important to recognize that we as elected officials are frequently not just on the offense, but we're on the defense. And we can be on the defense and offense at the same time, so we can tell Senator Lee that his form of public land sale is not welcome, while we can also advance other pieces that we would like to see happen, for example, the Sarvis Creek Wilderness expansion. Yeah, yes. We have some people here in the room working on that very hard, and those of you who've been here a while will remember that that is the place where the Catamount development went in. There was purported to be a ski area there. When that did not happen, and the wilderness area was designated, of course, but when the ski area, there were acreages removed. 7,000 acres were removed from that area because it was not put into wilderness due to some heavy lobby about that ski area. And so we are going to take that back. Our senators and our congressmen are going to help us with the Sarvis Creek Wilderness Act. I believe it's called the well, they can tell you what it is. Anyway, so I just want to let you know that from my perspective, and I think everybody else is in the room, these guys are working incredibly hard. They're connected to our communities. They're good human beings fundamentally, and that's what it takes in today's world of challenging politics. So with that, I'll hand it over to our senator.
Either way. So thank you, Steamboat. Thank you, Routt County. Let's say thank you to your wonderful commissioner, Gail. Thank you as well for being here today. Thank you all, thank you all, thank you all for being here. I'm going to be brief because I'm just going to introduce Joe Neguse. That's what I'm going to do today. That is what I'm going to do. And then we'll have a conversation about whatever it is you want to talk about. But let me say this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. If you are here to learn the answer to this question, which is how did we lose to Donald Trump again, which is a question that I've searching my brain many, many times. What I know is that if only we had the common sense to approach our politics the way Megan Lukens has approached her service to this community, we would never have lost to Donald Trump to begin with. It's true. It's true. So there's a shorthand for a lot of the rest of the conversation. I'm just going to say Megan Lukens, Megan Lukens, Megan Lukens. But it's true. So it's great to be in her presence, too. And this is now, I think this is 15 for you, Joe, town hall meetings. This is, I think, my 12th, which is by far the most of any of the current members of the U.S. Senate. I haven't caught up to Joe yet, but that's not bad, not too bad. Because I think this is a really important part of our job, and Joe thinks it's a really important part of his job. But it has been such a privilege to serve with him for all the reasons that the commissioner was saying. You know, his dedication to this district, his dedication to the nation, the work that we've done together on public lands that I hope we'll have a chance to talk about today, as well as his ability to serve in a very, very important role in leadership in the House of Representatives. I mean, in addition to representing this huge district, which he pointed out today, I mean, just one county of this district is bigger than Rhode Island. He said, don't tell people in Rhode Island. I always tell people in Rhode Island that stuff, just as a way to make them feel bad. And Delaware, too. But he not only is able to get around to a district that basically, as you know, represents every part of Colorado, the most liberal parts, the most progressive parts, and the reddest part of Colorado. And even though there are times when it feels like we're in this perpetual partisan battle. Joe faithfully represents everybody, whether they voted for him or not, and that is exactly the kind of representation I think this country needs. As a member of the House leadership, out there making sure that he's doing everything he can do to flip the House of Representatives in this next cycle, I think is really, really important too. So I see him coming and going, and often people say to me, oh, I feel so sorry for you, you have to get on that plane. Well, I get on the plane and come back, but I have the chance to be with Joe on the plane, so we have the chance to have exactly the same conversations you're having, which is, can you effing believe this? But then he is often, you know, in other places as well, making sure that we have the candidates we need, and that he's doing the work nationally too. So it is just an enormous privilege to serve with Joe Neguse. I think I can say this without any fear of contradiction, that if we had a few more like him, we might have a 90% approval rating in the Congress instead of the 9% approval rating that we have. I give you Joe Neguse.
There we go. The senator is far, far too kind, and it is great to be back in Steamboat Springs, great to be back in Routt County. You know, there was a reference made to Routt County leaving the 3rd Congressional District and entering the promised land of the 2nd Congressional District. So we were excited to welcome Routt County into the district a few years ago, and we've done
In fairness, the 3rd district is now no longer represented by
well,
that.
that's also true.
So
I,
just
you know,
to point
I
that out,
digress.
it's moving her way east.
I didn't want to get into it, but yes. So I will just say this, because the senator was so generous in his introduction, overly generous. In my view, when I first got elected to Congress, you know, I had only been to Washington, D.C. a handful of times in my life, and notwithstanding my zeal for, you know, representing the people of Colorado, was still getting my bearings and learning the ropes. And Senator Bennet was kind enough to mentor me. And one of the most important parts of that mentorship was his admonition, which I know he gives to every member of our delegation, which is to show up, to be responsive, to be present in the community, because that's the job. And I know that it's not lost on this crowd, but it's important for all those folks who might be watching the live stream as well to recognize that in a Senate of Ted Cruz's and Tommy Tuberville's and the rest, you have a United States Senator who has held more town halls this year than any member of the United States Senate across the country, Democratic or Republican. And he does them in, you know, communities that are more conservative. He does them in communities that are more liberal. He takes the tough questions because at the end of the day, he knows that that's what public service is all about, and he's lived that for the better part of the last 16 years, serving us, serving our state in the United States Senate. And every single example that Sonia, your wonderful county commissioners, by the way, they represent you so well, but every example that she offered in terms of the progress we've made on affordable housing, on public lands protection, the work that we've done, that has been engineered, conceived of by Senator Bennet, and he has been a tireless, thoughtful leader for our state. So I'm grateful that he let me crash his town hall to come by to talk to you all a little bit about democracy. It is true.
Oh, yes,
this is your town.
Bennett's town hall.
Got the name tag there.
I didn't even realize it.
He's very humble and very modest.
Who would like to ask Congressman Neguse the first question? No, should we start?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Who
Let's
would
get into
like,
some
we're
questions.
just going to do this. Sometimes we have people pick names out, not names, but numbers out of this group is small enough, we don't need to do that. So who would like to have the first? Yes.
My daughter has asked me, who's 20, what you guys can do about Palestine right now. I know that there was recently a Senate bill out there, and you know, just with the current situation, the current politics, what are your plans?
Did you say that your daughter is 20? Is that what you
Yes.
said? Yeah. So I am very. Please tell her that I'm grateful that she asked the question through you. And I have 3 daughters who are 25, 24, and 20. And the votes that I take on this subject are ones where we have extensive conversations before and extensive conversations after, and they are deeply worried about the situation as your daughter is, and as I am. And I think that, you know, while it is clear to me that that this part of this war started with Hamas's terrorist attack of Israel. There is nothing to justify the loss of now 50,000 people, maybe more. The estimates are greater than that in Gaza as a result of the way that Benjamin Netanyahu has executed this war. There have been important successes for Israel along the way here in Lebanon and in Iran that I think are very important. But I don't think that, in my opinion, they don't excuse the situation in Gaza. And we have to work tirelessly to try to figure out how to break what is effectively a blockade on resources to people there. And I believe that the United States is going to have to lead this effort. I think it's clear that that our allies can't do it without us, and that the ones in the Middle East won't do it without us. It's clear that Netanyahu won't do it, and I think that President Trump said earlier in this month that he also had come to the view that the United States was going to lead here. So I am hoping that we are going to be able to have, by the end of August, a bipartisan expression from the U.S. Senate to this administration saying the United States is going to have to lead on this and organize the allies around the world to make sure that we get the humanitarian aid that is so desperately needed when people are starving in Gaza. And well, it's not getting there. It's not getting to anybody who's there, and that there isn't enough aid either. But it's both problems, and please tell your daughter again, I'm grateful that she asked the question. Okay. Next question. Is there anybody on this side? Sorry, go ahead.
I guess there we go. Since I just renewed my vows after 25 years with my husband.
Hey!
Who I met in the Army, and I served this country proudly, but I'm really having an issue with using our military and ICE, and I feel very sad for all my soldiers that they're being asked to do certain things. I'm sure there's some that are okay with it, but I just don't feel that's the military I was ever in, or my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, or all of our family members. We are a very big military family. And what are we going to do about this? Please, and the whole ICE thing, that's just so wrong. I call them Gestapo.
Well, first I would say we owe your family a debt of gratitude for your service to our country, but I also want to say, and we should give a round of applause, but I also want to say thank you for being here and for using your voice and your platform. The two issues that you've identified, I think, one is in reference to what I view to be a very dangerous, blatant power grab by the president with respect to the attempted militarization of our nation's capital. And it should shock the conscience of everybody here in this community, and certainly of every American that might be tuning into this town hall online, that the president is acting in this way, and as you said, is having National Guard troops, guardsmen, guardswomen, patrolling the streets of our nation's capital, the world's longest continuous democracy. In my view, the greatest republic the world has ever known. And to see the president, again, debase the rule of law and I think function in a way that's not consistent with his constitutional obligations, it is outrageous, and I can tell that you feel the same way. At least with respect to that particular issue, a colleague of mine, Representative Raskin, he serves as the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, some of you may know. He's introduced a joint resolution, I believe there'll be one in the Senate as well, to pull back, because under the federal statute that the president has invoked, it only lasts for 30 days, and then Congress has an opportunity to intervene. And so I am hopeful that that will be one of the very first bills that we take up when Congress reconvenes. With respect to ICE, I think there's not a single person I've spoken with, irrespective of their political affiliation, who believes that it is in our interest as a country to rip apart families, people whom have known no other country but the United States as their home, and ship them off to foreign prisons. The stuff that this administration is pursuing with respect to the mass deportation, I think you're referencing, is not supported by the American public. The American public wants to see immigration reform, sensible immigration reform. By the way, we would not be in the circumstance that we are in today if the United States Senate had simply followed Senator Bennett's lead as one of the members of the Gang of Eight, conceived a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform policy that was broadly supported by the American public. Actually, the Senate did act on it. The House, in Republican hands, refused to take it up many, many years ago. But had we followed Senator Bennett's lead, I don't think we'd be finding the present circumstances that we're under. We're going to have to continue to speak truth to power. Fundamentally, I think that's what is required of all of us in this moment. You'll certainly continue to hear that, I think, from myself and from the senator and others.
Just think about how tragic that choice was. In 2013, when we passed that bill, which had 68 votes in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, it had a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million people that are here that are undocumented. By the way, more than 70% of the American people support that today. The most progressive DREAM Act that had ever been written, more than 90% of the American people support that today. All the visa stuff that's so important to the agricultural economy of Northwest Colorado and to the ski industry of Northwest Colorado, which we addressed, which is so important today. Border security, because everybody in the Senate knew that that was an important part of it too, and yet the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives got to have basically a veto and prevented it from ever coming to a vote. And now, directly as a result of that, we are reaping the whirlwind with Donald Trump's horrendous immigration policies. Yes. Yes.
Oh, I think
You
I
already have
the
a
mic.
microphone in your hand,
I
so
have the mic. I
far
do.
be it from me to take it away from you.
Yeah, no, well,
No,
first,
you take that away from, no.
first- Oh, yeah, no, I'm going to pass it to my friend Barb. Yeah. Well, first, thanks so much for being here. I mean, it's wonderful to have both of you in our presence and with all the answers. But the one question, the one question that I have is that, do you have a sense that there is a Democratic master plan underway or in development?
Do you?
Yeah, let us know when you find it.
Do you have that?
I have been known
Megan
to be a
Lukens,
comedian.
Megan Lukens, Megan Lukens.
I fell right into it. So, no, just a clear sense of the strategy for taking or being successful in 2026, 2028. It would just be wonderful to know that there's a singular or, a solid effort underway.
I will just say, yes, so the banter Senator Bennet and I were engaging here is because I've heard him so eloquently answer this particular question. I think in terms of really what I would describe as a scathing indictment of the Democratic Party in the past in terms of not offering an optimistic, hopeful vision for the future that's connected to the real lives of the American people. And I think the reality is we have not. I don't think the Democratic Party writ large has done an effective job at doing so. And I hear this same question, irrespective of whether I am in my district, at town halls across Colorado, of folks who are sort of waiting and trying to get a better sense as to what Democrats are offering. What I would say to you is that it cannot be just simply pushing back against the unlawful and unconstitutional actions of the Trump administration. Yes, of course, it's an important component of the work that we're engaged in now, and we're going to have to continue to lean in that regard. But at the end of the day, elections are binary choices. Right? You're given a choice between competing visions and platforms for the country. And I think we ought to get real serious real fast about talking about the ways in which we can actually improve the lives of the folks that we are privileged to serve. And our politics has become very disconnected from that, in my view, over time. Didn't happen overnight. And it's going to be a process that requires everyone here and countless others to engage. And that's my view. But in terms of whether there's there is no, I think the core part of your question, there's no one running to save us. I mean, there's not, it's the folks in this room, right? There is no panacea, there's no master plan. It is about doing the work, developing and building coalitions, as the senator articulated so well, as Megan Lukens has done, right, in the state legislature, anchored in. Megan might have to just jump up and start answering questions, but the point is it's instructive, offers an instructive example. So that would be my view. Happy to drill down further, but Senator?
I think the answer is no. That's what I believe, and I think I think that there is, and I know not everybody here is a Democrat. I hope that's true. I hope not everybody here is a Democrat. I hope that there are people here with different political points of view. Speaking for myself only, I don't think we should have lost to Donald Trump the first time, much less the second time. He was able to take 4 years off, basically, and still beat us, after he had the record that he had. So when you hear people go on, and by the way, when you hear people go on the cable television and talk endlessly about how corrupt he is, as if they don't know that, as if the American people don't understand that, it sort of begs the question that Joe was mentioning, which is our argument effective? It's not that we shouldn't be making it. And obviously we should be fighting back for our democracy. We should be fighting back to support every single institution that's now under assault by this administration. But by the way, he's not doing anything, basically, that he didn't promise to do when he was running for office, which is part of the problem. When he built a majority coalition to get elected president. And we couldn't stop it knowing what we know about it sitting in this room. And we have to ask ourselves, why were we not able to build a governing coalition to beat him either time? And I think it's because of what Joe said, which is for too long people feel like the stuff we were talking about was not responsive to their life. You tell me, Routt County, what the Democrats' education policy was in the last presidential election. Go ahead, tell me, what was it? You don't know, there wasn't one. You tell me what our health care policy was. I'll tell you, extending the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, that's important, but this is a country that actually needs universal health care. And we should be standing for that as a party. As an example, I could go down the list of all the things, and you'd say, why wasn't I thinking about it then? Or why weren't we thinking about it then? We have to build that coalition. We have to recognize the fact that in this country today, more and more people feel like the American dream is out of reach for themselves and their families. And no matter how hard they work, they can't get ahead. And more important than that, no matter how hard they work, their kids can't get ahead. And in Colorado today, there's not a county in our state, Megan, where anybody thinks that their kids are going to be able to afford to live in that county. There's not a neighborhood where anybody gets up thinking, oh, well, I'm happy because I know my kid is going to be able to afford a house in the neighborhood in which we live. I know that's true in Steamboat. I know that's true in Routt County. That's true in our country in different ways, where, for example, if you're a young man in this country, on average, you're making 40% less today than you were in 1976. That'll piss you off for a good reason. And this party needs to have answers for that, which we didn't. By the way, I'll answer the question on education. It was deferring or getting rid of people's college loan debt in a country where 60% of the American people don't have college degrees, in a country where there are people all over Routt County and everywhere between here and the Utah line who have all kinds of debt except for college loan debt that they'd like somebody to help them with, but the Democratic Party was turning their backs on them. So it's the kind of thing that we need to wrestle with, and I think it's very, very important. I am furious at Trump. Everybody here is. I am furious at people that aren't standing up to Trump. Everybody here is. Thank you very much for calling when you saw me rip Bobby Kennedy's face off. I really appreciate that. But it's not enough. We need a compelling vision of what the future is going to look like. And that's what our party needs to have. And if we don't have it, we're going to keep losing. And if we don't have it, we're going to keep dealing with the threat to our democracy that your daughter does not deserve to inherit, and that my daughters do not deserve to inherit.
Anybody who knows me is going to know that I'm going to ask a question about the environment. I'm very, very, very nervous and scared about what's going on with the world today, the earth today, more correctly. When it comes to the environment and climate change, I like to say I think everything else is small potatoes. Our climate is the most important thing we should be worried about. But I also wanted to say, too, that I was dismayed and saddened, but not at all surprised, that the plastics conference broke down. And due to the petroleum industry and their hold on most of what we do in our world today. But I'm also am very happy to read a text that my sister wrote me just today. I have noticed glasses of water instead of plastic bottles at recent meetings, including today on the House of Representatives. So yay, I think it's great that, and I think in our public places we need to start being better about providing glass pitchers and cups instead of plastic bottles. So, sorry about that. I mean, thank you for hearing me out. Any thoughts?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for being here, and thanks for the thoughtful question. I guess let me start with public lands, because I think it connects to the core of your question. And this was referenced, of course, by your wonderful city council president, who I failed to acknowledge at the outset. But just for the record, my first trip to Routt County post-redistricting, as I was getting ready to represent this wonderful community, your Steamboat city council president insisted on taking me to one place first, the post office, just so that you all better understand just how high of a priority she places the post office and responsive government. So we're grateful to her for her leadership. Let's give her a round of applause. Look, here's what I'd say. The reason why I reference public lands. One question that I've got at a lot of town halls is that in this moment that we find ourselves in, very precarious moment for our republic, there's this sense of kind of helplessness or hopelessness, and the idea that our public institutions are somehow impervious to public opinion. And I think it's really important for us to resist the temptation in, subscribing to that belief. And the two examples that I believe are instructive happen to be in the context of environmental challenges that we face as a country. The first is public lands protection. As our commissioner noted just 2 months ago, there was an effort, a nascent effort in the United States Senate by Senator Mike Lee, neighboring state of Utah, to sell off 2 to 3 million acres of public lands to the highest bidder. And he failed, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the span of 9 days during the debate on this terrible bill. And it didn't happen, but that didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen by osmosis. I mean, it was a byproduct of citizens from across the country, including here in Routt County and elsewhere, making their voices heard, sufficient outcry, vociferous opposition that kind of rose up from folks across the country, including in places like Idaho and Wyoming and Utah and elsewhere. And it took very thoughtful leadership on the part of Senator Bennet, working to build a coalition to stop that effort in its tracks. And so I would just suggest that there are ways, we shouldn't assume that us lifting our voices in unison and building this crescendo won't have an impact. To put an even finer point on this, the senior senator from the state of Iowa, Chuck Grassley, right now has a hold placed on 2 nominees to the Treasury Department. Right? So these are Trump's nominees to the Treasury Department. And he has placed a hold on their confirmations. Why? Because he's trying to get, as best as I can tell from these reports that I'm reading, a commitment from the Treasury Secretary to not violate the law with respect to the wind down, the phase down of the IRA tax credits for wind and solar production in our country. Why? Because Iowa, 58% of their energy production is from wind. And so I don't think it's an accident that Senator, now of course they still proceeded with gutting core components of the IRA. But the point of that, perhaps, that story, and the reason why I share it, is that he is getting a lot of pressure from constituents in Iowa who care a great deal about the fight against climate change and the need for us to diversify our energy portfolios. And so that activity, that organization, that collective voice matters a great deal. And for all of you who might be feeling a little bit hopeless about developments in Washington, D.C. or even further away, I would hope that you just take that piece of encouragement that your voice matters.
The only thing I would add is it was incredibly painful to watch 15 years of work, for some people 25 years of work, go down the drain when all of those tax credits that I'd worked on all those years on wind and solar on the Finance Committee were eviscerated in a bill that, honestly was even worse than most people imagined it would be, although again, it was completely consistent with what he said he was going to do when he ran for president, saying, drill, baby, drill, And again, this is a situation where we lost to somebody whose energy policy is not supported by the American people. The American people believe climate change is real. The American people believe that our kids are going to hang us up by our fingernails if we don't address this, and yet they elected somebody who has the policies Trump has, notwithstanding that. And it begs the question, what went wrong in the election? In the meantime, I think Colorado can be the leader of all 50 states in the climate policy that we can adopt here, and that's what we should do. We should be a beacon for the rest of the country. Yes, all the way in the back.
Couple questions if I can do too. I really like.
I'm now going to drink from this plastic bottle, but it's the last one ever. Never again. Go ahead.
You can pour it into your hand.
Whatever it takes.
I really liked your Gang of Eight immigration proposal. It's sad that it didn't get the necessary traction. Sounds like a pointed question, but why can't you give it another go? The other question that I'd like you to comment on to the woman's question, why I read a transcript of an interview that Barry Weiss interviewed Rahm Emanuel. And Barry Weiss asked Rahm the question, why'd you guys lose to Trump? One of his many responses was, we spent too much time on the bathroom and not enough time on the classroom. If you'd comment on both of those.
On the classroom, I'll tell you what I think our education policy should be. I think our education policy should be that every kid who graduates from high school should graduate with the skills to earn a living wage, not the minimum wage. I think that would win a national election. And that is what we should be focused on instead of the stuff that I mentioned earlier. On the immigration bill, it's very simple. There was a reason why John McCain and Lindsey Graham were sitting at that Gang of Eight table, and that's because they believed they could never elect another Republican president if they didn't help fix the immigration system. What happened instead? Donald Trump rode down the escalator at Trump Tower and said Mexicans are rapists, and he was not only nominated by the Republican Party, he was elected president, not just once, but twice. And that's why we can't do the Gang of Eight bill today. The last piece of it that I was holding on to was the agriculture provisions, which I had negotiated with Dianne Feinstein and Orrin Hatch and our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And that, 2 years ago, I was down to one Republican, one guy from Idaho, who's still willing to be on a bill that was largely supported by, of course, the farm workers, but also by the growers, who are mostly Republican, and he's now off that bill. So there's not even one Republican in the Senate who will sign up to the ag part of this immigration bill with Donald Trump as president. So we have to rebuild. We're going to have to rebuild. And we're going to have to remind the American people what it looks like to have an immigration policy that's committed to the rule of law and who we are as a nation of immigrants. I think we can do that, and I think we will do that, but it will never happen as long as Donald Trump is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay. Yes. Yes. Or yes, I was.
Who are you pointing at, Michael? All right. I'm also calling last question.
No way, that's impossible. No.
It's a lot of pressure. First, I just want to say I talked to your office staff in Washington, D.C., and they're so pleasant and kind every time that I get one of them on the phone. So I just wanted you to know that, and y'all, wherever you're standing here. My question is about the Department of Justice. My father was an FBI agent for 25 years in Manhattan, and our family's been watching what's been happening with the FBI, Kash Patel and Attorney General Bondi, and what they're culling and firing agents with integrity across not just the FBI, but multiple intelligence agencies that are critical to the safety of our nation. Is there anything you can do to protect those agents with integrity who are working cases and going home to their families, and to restore integrity to the Department of Justice and all the work that they do?
A couple things I'd say. I mean, first, grateful to you and your family and their commitment to service to our country. It's shameful what's happening at the Department of Justice. And who would have thought, I mean, as the senator mentioned, you go back to Trump's first term, and Jeff Sessions, who was Attorney General, Bill Barr, who testified in front of my committee. I serve on the House Judiciary Committee. We tangled quite a bit in terms of those hearings. Who would have thought that you could do worse? And yet, here we are, with an Attorney General who is weaponizing the Department of Justice to an extent that we just have not seen in the modern, certainly in the modern history of our country. And that is happening in our law enforcement agencies as well, as you recounted with respect to the FBI and elsewhere across the wide panoply of agencies within the federal government, the reality is. And I know the senator worked at one point for the Department of Justice as well, so he feels passionately about this. I would say that we're going to have to, we're in the minority in the House, right? And so while we do have some procedural tools available to us, they are not as robust as they would be if we were in the majority. In the meantime, right now, I think the appropriations process in particular, and my colleagues who serve on the appropriations subcommittee that's responsible for overseeing the Department of Justice are very much leaning in this regard of trying to use that budgetary process to hold the Department of Justice accountable and try to stop the lawlessness, protect rank and file agents and folks who are working within the Department of Justice. But what they are doing with respect to U.S. attorneys in New Jersey and New York, I mean, it is very dangerous stuff. And the precedents they are setting, the precedents that they are breaking simultaneously, ought to frighten Americans.
And I would just add, as somebody who had also worked at the Department of Justice, thank you very much for your dad's service, that what's also agonizing is to see the people in the Senate ratifying this terrible behavior. Saying that this is somehow the new normal, when until this administration, we literally had never seen anything like this before when it came to law enforcement. And it's one more thing we're going to have to push through with these guys to get to the other side. So thank you, and I'm going to see if there's anybody else over here. I know they called the question, but I'm not going to allow that to happen with so many people that are here. Is there anybody toward the back over here, or I'll take you, sir? Yeah? And then in the green, yeah, we'll come.
Last Monday, we had Samuel Issacharoff speaking here. He's a constitutional scholar at NYU. And he was talking about a couple things. First thing was there have been 5 bills passed in the legislature this year. 5. And everything else has been done by presidential proclamation. His claim was that there is this large group of people in the middle that you talk about, but that the Republican and Democratic parties no longer are relevant in deal making and that kind of ward politics of the old days when you would go across the aisle and promise something later on. I asked him, well, what is the new order? What is the replacement for this? And he said, I have no idea. What do you have?
Great tee up on that question. Yeah, I share his concerns, and I guess I'd answer it in a couple of different ways. First, I would say that the kind of larger, more esoteric issue around the constitutional order, and it's an important one for all of us to kind of grapple and consider. For a long time, the Congress, I think, has abdicated its duties under Article 1. That has been a long time coming over the course of really the last half century. It's gotten a lot worse and now turbocharged by a president who has no regard for the rule of law. And so, with respect to the power to to issue tariffs, right? Or the ability for us to appropriate funds that then should be lawfully dispersed and not impounded. There are countless examples where I think the Congress, over time, right, just encroaching levels of executive authority such that the Congress abdicated its role, and now we find ourselves where we are today. To your specific point, and I suppose it connects back to the gentleman's question in the back about the immigration bill, the Gang of Eight bill that Senator Bennet had worked so vociferously on back in 2013. Politics, like so much else in life, I think is incentive-based. And if you want to change behavior, you change incentives. And our politics, the reality is, has become far more performative today than it has ever been. And if the metric by which you evaluate on both sides of the aisle the efficacy of your government officials, your civil servants, is whether or not they go viral on Instagram, you are likely to breed a political environment in which that is the central currency. And you don't have an environment by which you can actually reach accommodations and agreements and bipartisan accords and try to make the lives of the American people better, which fundamentally is what politics is all about. And so I think and there are we could spend a lot of time talking about the various reasons, the warped incentives that exist in our political system today by virtue of a broken campaign finance system, by virtue of gerrymandering, political corruption. But part of it is also the sort of social media ecosystem and how we get our news. And I think all of that, the confluence of all of these different factors creates a system by which politicians are no longer responsive to the sort of the core parts of the job that they're supposed to be doing. And that's, in my view, why we find ourselves where we are.
One of the things that when I'm meeting with people the age of your daughter and my daughter or younger, one of the things that I beg them not to do is follow our terrible example, and especially the terrible example of the people shooting their mouths off on the cable television at night or pretending that they have a monopoly of wisdom on these pernicious social media platforms that are tearing us to shreds. The way a democracy is supposed to work is that it's supposed to generate wisdom out of our conflict. You know what I mean? It's not that we're all going to agree with each other. It's that we're going to show up in a free society with freedom of speech, with freedom of the press, at a town hall like this, able to express our different point of view, our disagreement. Out of that disagreement, come to a more imaginative solution than any king or tyrant could come up with on their own. I mean, the founders of this country understood that very well. They knew the only places in the world where humans agreed with each other were places where there was a totalitarian at the top telling everybody what to think. And we have completely lost that, not just in our Congress, but in the political discourse that we have as a nation. We have to recapture that, or else we're going to lose the wisdom of the democracy forever. And I'm a much bigger believer in democracy today, believe it or not, with all the insanity that we've lived through there in the last, than I was, because I see the cost if we fail and what we will have given up, what we will have relinquished, that other generations of Americans never made perfect. They never made it perfect. Going back to the founding of this country, it's never been perfect, but we were making progress, and we were making progress, and we were making progress. And now we're going to have to get to the other side of this and make sure that we replace it with a politics that looks completely different than the politics that we have right now. You're right. The Congress is down to basically two bills a session, the defense bill and the reconciliation package. And that's pitiful. Yes.
Hi there. My name's Jenny Stolarski, and I'm a realtor. I have been since 2004, so 21 years. And this comes to your reference of housing affordability. So in that time, starting about 12 years ago, we saw corporations get into single-family home purchases, and I'm wondering if you see any hope at all of putting that genie back in the bottle, because I think that that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest causes of the affordability crisis as we see it right now.
Are you seeing that here in Steamboat and Route? To describe it just a little bit. while we
Describe
have-
what it's like to be a person in Steamboat Springs trying to find a house to
No,
live in.
no. No, I'm asking about the corporate ownership that
Corporate
you're
ownership.
Yeah.
I mean, REITs, corporate ownership of all sorts of single-family houses. Corporations can buy houses anywhere.
No, I know that. I'm just trying to get a feel for what it looks like in Steamboat in Route
I mean,
County.
anybody care to talk about Airbnbs or talk about people buying
I got
houses to
that
rent
part
them
of it,
out?
but I'm just was
Which
I
specific part? I'm sorry. I'm curious. I'm
It's
thinking
okay.
of REITs
It's okay.
and how
Okay.
corporations are able to buy houses specifically
Right.
through a REIT or through a real
Yeah.
estate investment trust.
Yeah.
And
It's okay. It's okay.
okay.
It's okay. I think that that we are having an affordability crisis in Colorado. It's partly created by that, but it is created by many other things as well that are huge. That have created a huge problem for our kids and for the next generation and for everybody. I mean, and I guess the way I'm looking at this is that I don't care whether you call yourself a progressive or a conservative. If our kids can't afford to live in our state, there's a real problem here. And there is a real problem here. And I know I'm very familiar with what Steamboat has been wrestling with, what Route County has been wrestling with. I'm very familiar with the successes and the failures along the journey here in terms of dealing with it. As a state, I think we're going to have to figure out how to build much more housing in Colorado. We're going to have to do it more cheaply, and we're going to have to do it near where people live in order to deliver for the next generation of Coloradans. We can't just treat it like it's beyond our control, which is, I think, how we have been treating it as a state. This is also going to require really tough decisions, and a one-size-fits-all solution is not going to be the answer. But I believe this is the number one issue that's facing the state of Colorado right now. Yes. One more, that's it. Karen. That's all right. You get two because it says everybody counts.
I've been sitting here listening to fellow people in Route County and listening to you and knowing how much both of you have done for our state and for our community and how you point out to the wonderful people who help us. And I've worked with Catherine and many other people here when it's an election, and I'll go to the office or I'll, write letters or do phone calls and things like that. And now I'm thinking that we do have Indivisible. It hasn't come up today at all. But I haven't done much recently because I fractured my femur, and so I've been sort of working on healing. But can you tell us, Senator Bennet and Representative Neguse, two people who I respect highly, what should we be doing? I mean, we're asking you what the Senate is doing or what the Congress is doing, but what could you tell us that we could be doing other than, okay, I'll call my senator. If we call a Democratic senator and we're Democrats, where's that going to go? We all know what each other thinks. And so can you tell us how we can help? I mean...
Go ahead.
Sure, great question. And again, I know something that I get a lot at different town halls because I think there's a general, just visceral sense of folks wanting to do something to push back against all of what we've described that's happening at the federal level. Here's what I would say. One, keep calling our office. Keep calling. I mean, I'm not telling you to call Senator Bennett's office, but keep calling Senator Bennett's office. Keep calling Senator Hickenlooper's office. It matters, even if we don't necessarily, I mean, we might agree and have the same worldview on a wide variety of issues. We might not. But even insofar as we do agree, it helps us from a prioritization standpoint as my office is considering, with the legislation that we're working on and where we're leaning in. Hearing from my communities, the communities that I'm so lucky to represent, is a very important component of that. That's one. Two, what I would suggest to you is that there are still a lot of Americans and a lot of Coloradans who do not know the full picture with respect to the consequences that we are all going to be living through as a byproduct of what Republicans have done over the last 7 months. 40 miles west of here, you have communities in Moffett County and in Rio Blanco County and in Mesa County that will be devastated by the Medicaid cuts in the terrible budget bill. We'll be devastated if the ACA credits are not extended and the markets in our more rural and mountainous parts of our state collapse. You have families who are going to be living through the consequences of the snap cuts, these draconian, cruel snap cuts that Senator Bennet fought against on the Agriculture Committee. And a lot of Coloradans and a lot of Americans writ large don't necessarily know what's coming and also don't know who's responsible. And so it's important from an educational standpoint. You all have a lot of neighbors, a lot of friends, a lot of family members, a lot of colleagues, fellow Coloradans of good faith in different parts of our state. And I think it would be important and incumbent upon you to spread the word, to talk to those folks about the consequences of what's happened in the last 7-8 months since President Trump first took office. To me, that's a very important component. And I mentioned those counties very particularly because they happen to be in a different congressional district that you might be familiar with. In the 3rd congressional district, where you have upwards of 6, maybe 7 hospitals, rural hospitals that may close in the next year and a half by virtue of the legislation that was signed into law. So that matters, and it will have a ripple effect, in my view, in terms of obviously, electorally, but also in the court of public opinion.
I think it's such a great question to end on. First of all, let me say this. You get to take a break when you break your femur. Let me say that. Okay, so you don't need to feel guilty about that. Or you don't need Catherine telling you that you better get down to the headquarters because you can still call when your femur is broken, which I suspect she said. And by the way, Catherine was the first person that told me about the post offices, and that probably was 16 years ago. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for all of that. I want to say this, because, Joe and I have done a lot of these together, and we've done a lot of work together. And the public lands work is, in some ways, my favorite work that we've done. And part of it is because you learn the history of Colorado while you're doing it. And one of those histories was around Camp Hale, which some of you know and probably have heard of. And, that was the place where we set up an Army base for people to come here to train at high altitude on skis. And the guys that trained as part of the 10th Mountain Division were sent over to Europe, to northern Italy, where they pushed the Nazis out of the places nobody ever thought anybody could get to, these very high places. And those guys helped win the war, because of the 3 years they spent in Colorado in a place so cold they called it Camp Hell, a place where there were people that were the most expert skiers in the country, in the world, who came there, and mountaineers, and people who never saw snow, who came and trained together. And then they came back and started our ski resorts, and they started the outdoor rec industry that is so important to Routt County and so important to Steamboat. And I was really proud when Joe Biden came out and made that the first national monument of his administration right here in Colorado. But as I traveled the state, I was also saying to people, while we had that camp, there was another camp, which, a lot of people don't remember, which was a camp out on the eastern plains of Colorado in the town of Grenada. It's the camp called Camp Amachi. That was built at exactly the same moment that Camp Hale was built, exactly the same war against tyranny, exactly the same fight for freedom. And yet, at Camp Amachi, 12,000 Japanese American citizens were incarcerated behind barbed wire, ostensibly out of the same small d democratic battle that we were having. And because of Joe Neguse's leadership and work, that is now part of the National Park Service. And this is the reason, I think, in many ways. This is the reason, in many ways, that Donald Trump is trying to whitewash our history, so that we don't understand that from basically where we are today to the very beginning, we have always had a battle between the highest ideals that had ever written on the page, the words in the Declaration of Independence, and the worst impulses in human history. In our case, it's human slavery and the genocide of Native Americans. By the way, that's not a woke history of America. That is the history of America. And I think just as important as what Joe said, which is critically important, which is making sure people understand the effects of this bill, to understand what it looks like to have Medicaid ripped away from a rural hospital that already doesn't have OB services, that already doesn't have the basic mental health that exists in any other industrialized country in the world, but somehow doesn't exist on the western slope of Colorado before those cuts, or what the cost of a Department of Justice looks like when the FBI isn't treated like the public servants that they are, but like the president's own law firm and, constabulary, that what that cause of that is, but it's just as important for people to know what the history of this country is, and the history that they're trying to whitewash. And as Joe says sometimes, and I say sometimes, no matter how corrupt anybody in this audience thinks this country is, or our children, to be precise, have a reason to think it is, because we have not yet delivered for them. No one has any more reason to think that it was as corrupt as John Lewis had a reason to think it was corrupt when he was subjecting his skull to the billy clubs on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It's true, for the sake of democracy, not for the sake of John Lewis. And that's the moment that we are in. It's a different moment. It's a different time. As Joe said, there is no one riding to our rescue. It is the people in this room and people just like you all across the country that are going to be the answer to that. And part of it is just saying that the harder it is, the harder we have to fight. The more corrupt our kids think it is what I say to them, the more you have to get someone else to vote. Sometimes that sounds self-absorbed because it's coming from a politician. From it's coming from you, it's different. And it's true. And John Lewis knew that. And the women that fought for 100 years to win the self-evident right to vote in this country, when other countries around the world, they knew it too. And so I think the answer to your question is, we know the answer to your question. We have to get out there. We have to knock on those doors. We have to make phone calls. I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about reaching people face to face and reminding people what this democracy is really all about. Having the kind of conversations that you were having the other night with that constitutional scholar, and then putting it to work as we mobilize to turn, to change the complexion of our political system in Washington. That's what we have to do. And sometimes people say to me, when's this going to be over? I don't mean this incredibly long speech. I'm going to stop. When is this going to be over? And the answer is, we're going to be doing this for the rest of our lives. That's the honest answer. And that was the answer that the women that fought for the right to vote had to contend with. That was the answer that John Lewis had to contend with. We have no right to expect anything else. I think the most important thing we can do is find a way to engage young people in this battle, find a way to pull them into a democracy where they feel alienated for really good reason, where they feel like they haven't been given a shot, where they don't have a chance to buy a house, where they haven't been given an education that's going to allow them to earn a living wage, or a healthcare system like anybody else has in the industrialized world. Those are all things worth fighting for, and we can win those things. But we're going to have to do it. And so what? Just you. Just you. You and Catherine. All of us. All of us. Thank you for that question.